Medical Devices Group 18. The consultants for this project are Gunjan, Oliver, and Bradley. We have been hired by Ms. Kustra, the CEO of Westeros, which is a company that manufactures electronic diagnostic equipment. The problem: Ms. Kustra wants to grow her company by expanding into the medical device manufacturing. She's hired us to help her decide whether she should expand into the US or China market. The largest competitor in the U.S. is Medtronic plc. It is known as the world's largest medical device technology development company. Some of its products include the insulin pump and the pacemaker. The largest competitor in China is GE Healthcare. GE Healthcare is known as having a broad expertise in medical imaging and information technologies. Some of its products include the Discovery IGS 740 and the vScan. As you can see from this table, the US market is a lot larger than the China market. A small company like Westeros will have a lot more chance of succeeding in a smaller market like China than the US market. Also, the China market is predicted to have growth of almost 10% in 15 to 20 years, which is a lot larger than the projections for the US market. From this table, you can see that the US market is a lot less fragmented than the Chinese market. The top competitor in the US market has 32.2% share, while the top competitor in China has 14.8% share. This shows that a small company such as Westeros will have more chance of breaking into the Chinese market versus the US market.
Alright, this is Oliver Zarn speaking, and I'll be going over a few ways in which demand exists for medical devices. Starting with the US, recent healthcare funding programs like the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act have made funding for replacements of current medical equipment more available to manufacturers, which will motivate them to create new products and heighten demand for these creations. Also, the undertreated obesity problem in the U.S. provides a significant opportunity for drug and device companies to profit over the next several years. In 2014, the total U.S. market for new obesity drugs and minimally invasive medical devices for obesity treatment was estimated to be $375 million, with that amount projected to be $455 million in 2015 and potentially $1.85 billion in 2020. In China, healthcare reform over the past 5 years resulted in private and county-level hospitals receiving huge investments from the Chinese government, which raised demand for industry products. With a growing Chinese middle class, there are hundreds of millions of new patients needing treatment from high-tech devices, such as pacemakers, defibrillators, and insulin pumps. Also, China's annual medical device manufacturing and sourcing trade fair called China MedTech exceeded expectations this past year. Clearly, a lot of money is being put into the industry here, as estimates for 2016 MedTech are looking to be even more promising. Moving on to industry trends, in the U.S., the trade deficit for medical devices will continue to grow as imports are projected to rise while exports will fall. Imports actually did fall in 2015 due to unexpectedly slow economic recovery in some foreign countries where medical devices are produced. However, this will quickly change as we move into 2016 and the lingering effects of a global recession become obsolete. Exports of medical devices are projected to decrease because more manufacturers are establishing operations abroad, thereby reducing the need for other countries to import devices from the U.S. Also, consumer price elasticity is increasing. Normally, medical device manufacturers guard their intellectual property by requiring customers to sign confidentiality agreements, which makes pricing information obscure and limits price competition. However, downstream customer industries using recession-induced cost cutting has itself forced price to become a largely relevant factor for competitors. The Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act plays a role here by limiting the efforts of confidentiality with healthcare costs. Lastly, consumers are very cost-sensitive to in-home medical care, which is growing in popularity. In China, globalization is increasing for numerous reasons, but I'll just mention two here. The first is that the competitive structure of the industry is changing over the next 5 years, mainly coming from the development of domestic companies rebounding against the huge foreign presence that is currently in China. Also, there is a currency depreciation in the short term, with the Chinese yuan expecting to appreciate at some point in the future, but right now the depreciation is high. Also, the last trend is increase in consumer spending, as new social security systems and healthcare reforms make medical expenditures more affordable for Chinese citizens, especially in rural areas. And then lastly, I'll go through some worldwide trends that are affecting multiple countries. The first is a rise in power and energy requirements for portable battery-powered medtech devices. So those that make these kinds of devices will be affected by it. The second is medtech companies are securing products to protect brand and reputation. The security is very important for them in order to protect their intellectual property, as I've previously mentioned. And lastly, protective coating innovations are becoming a new trend for implantable medical devices. So the makers of these medical devices will have to start collaborating with protective coating makers with new innovations. And now I will pass it off to Bradley.
This is Bradley Noblock, and I'll be wrapping up this presentation. So with all the information in place, it's our recommendation to enter the Chinese market. We decided to follow this route for several reasons, but the biggest is that there's plenty of opportunities to grow. When entering this market, current manufacturing expertise can be used to achieve not only economies of scope, but ultimately in the long term we can get economies of scale. Additionally, the Chinese market, again in the long term, is expected to grow by 9% versus the 3.3% in the US. The Chinese market's also more fragmented, which makes it a lot easier for us to become established. So some potential problems Ms. Kustra should be aware of is that this is a highly competitive industry. In order to combat this, it's going to be very important to focus on producing the highest quality product at the lowest possible price. To do this, economies of scale is going to be extremely critical. Additionally, the high capital requirements make it hard to enter this market, but we are very confident that there's plenty of resources to be invested. We must emphasize, though, that right now is not going to be the time to cut corners because we're still trying to establish ourselves in this market. This is also a heavily regulated industry, so following current regulations is very important. Ultimately, though, the focus on quality should make this less problematic. And finally, because this is a fairly new market in China, it's both a blessing and a burden. While there's certainly a very high potential in this market, other competitors see this opportunity as well, so it's going to be very important to focus on getting established first. And in order to do this, again, we can't emphasize enough, we have to focus on a very high quality but also fairly low price. So to wrap things up, we've established a list of sources in order to confirm the data if needed. We're more than happy to answer any additional questions should they arise, and we thank you for this opportunity, and we're looking forward to see this company grow.